Thank you everybody for coming to the closing keynote. I feel like one of the bookends. I did kick off Tuesday morning and been in lots of sessions with you for the last yesterday and today. And now I get to share kind of the latest work we've been doing, kind of partnering with DBTA. So what I'm going to share with you in the closing, you're probably wondering, obviously all the talk about Gen AI, data. On Tuesday, I taught about data architectures, roadmaps, architecture strategies. Lots of buzzwords out there. So what we've been doing for the last couple of years is running an industry survey to get a feel for who's doing what. I mean, there's a lot of talk, but who's really adopting things? What are their hesitations? What are their budgets, right? Stuff like that. So I'm going to actually share with you some of the data from that. We just got a couple of weeks ago, so I've kind of pulled it all together and kind of want to run you through that. We are going to publish, DBTA is going to publish the full report of this probably in about 2 weeks. So expect that in your inbox, and you can read all the full report in details. But these are the highlights nobody's seen yet. So with that, this was modern data architecture in the era of AI. These were the different architecture trends that we are covering. So I asked and we designed about 42 different questions. About 10 or 11 of them were demographics, but asking questions around these top 6 data architectures, right? Cloud data warehousing is still a mainstay. Data lakehouse, data fabric, streaming data analytic architectures, semantic layer and search architectures, and of course, generative AI. And with that, you can see we were running the field survey in March. We completed that at the end of March. I just got the data back. We had 259 qualified respondents. So I had a lot of questions in there that if you weren't quite kind of the right fit to be taking the survey, we said thank you very much and kind of exited the survey process. And what's interesting with this one is that we've been alternating between data architecture, technical architectures, and data management is what we did last year. So we are actually going to take 2 years and do some comparisons as well to see how things have changed. So with that, we did have sponsors. So the nice part here is that research gets sponsored. They get the full report, display, and share with their customers and prospects, of course. So Denodo, One House, and Quest were our sponsors this year. And with that, so what's funny is I was kind of looking at this yesterday evening, kind of saying, oh, let's share with you all the demographics. My first question is going to be, okay, who's in the demographic pool? What industries? What regions? What size of companies? What's their budgets? But I think with you guys, you probably just want to get right to it. So I switched that all up, threw it in the appendix, and said, okay, let's get some real answers here. So number 1, budget. I'm not sure how well you guys can read that. It's a little bit small because I try to put it on 2 pages. But here we have who have budget. Yes, approved, and yes, submitted. We've got about 85% of companies in this pool saying that they're budgeted for data architecture work. Now, what was their budget amount? That's the other key. This one's pretty interesting. I didn't pull in the 2023 data, but I did take a quick look at it. You can see at the top we have the over 1 million, so big time budgets, right, for these things. We have the 100 to 500K at number 2, 27%. That's something that I think is about average, right? I work with a lot of clients in advisory services, and we're budgeting for the next year, maybe a couple of key projects, a data catalog, or some other kind of integration tool, or different things in the architecture we want to budget for. They're in that 250 to 300 range. That's kind of an average I've seen. But here, 50,000 to 100,000 took the lead at 29%. So what we're seeing in Q1 of this year is that most companies are actually budgeting smaller amounts for projects this year. So they're going to be smaller and probably more specific and more targeted. So that's one of the things I'm going to drill into a little bit more in the data. There is budget for 1 to 50,000 at 17%, and then there's that spot between 500,000 and $1 million that comes in at 11%. So you can take a look at your companies. The whole idea here, the whole theme of this survey is for you guys to say, well, gosh, I know what's going on in my company. Is anybody else in the same boat? right? Are they the same size company? Can I relate? We have some budget. It's either submitted or approved. Maybe you kicked in $750,000. Well, what did everybody else do? So I kind of know that's how you guys are reading this. So that's the whole purpose of this survey. So that's the first question about budgets. 80%, 85% of people in companies say they are budgeted, and a majority of them are doing smaller projects this year. Now, considering the research, here is the first question we have, which is, I put the question at the top, which of the following data architectures is your company currently researching or considering? Top ones, generative AI with LLMs, 68.4%. So that, we've heard a lot about the LLMs and generative AI work within architecture, so that kind of registers with what we're seeing. Real-time analytics, streaming data and real-time analytics actually came in number 2. Sometimes it's a surprise to me that real-time does and sometimes it doesn't, but it always seems to be in the top 3. Modernizing our cloud data warehouse, most people, 58%, are still doing that. I think that's kind of a mainstream thing right now. If you look at each one of these, the way I've looked at it is at the point in which they were introduced as a topic, whether it was fabric or data mesh or semantic layers. You look at the point where that term in that architecture kind of was born, and then you watch an education period for 1 year, 18 months, 2 years, and then as people start to adopt and get some use cases and experience, and then it starts to move into mainstream. So we're seeing multiple waves of adoption going on here. And of course, streaming data is not new for us. It's been around for quite a while. Streaming IoT data, that one's kind of up on the list. Lakehouse is before that, which Lakehouse actually has kind of been around a little bit longer than the data fabric and the data mesh, I think. So that kind of checks out. Data fabric and semantic layer, I broke those two out, but what's interesting about that is there is kind of this, discussion in the industry that they're separate. I kind of think they're the same thing. Or let's put it this way, semantic layers are a key part of a data fabric. That's the way I kind of view it. So with that, you can see they're pretty close together, followed by the data mesh at 20%. And this is researching or considering at companies. Now, this is March of this year when we ran the survey. Here's how it compared to 2 years ago. So in 2 years ago, of course, we didn't ask about generative AI 2 years ago, so it came out of nowhere and took the #1 spot. What I find interesting about real-time and modernizing to cloud warehousing is that they're #1 or #2 and #3, but they flipped. So when we looked at this last time, what we had was that modernizing data warehousing kind of came in at #1 and real-time came in at #2. And that was 2 years ago. So we're seeing this kind of increasing or change in acceptance or realization towards real-time data as part of our architectures, at least being enabled and capable of handling that. The other ones, they've increased in percentage, but they kind of held the same between data lakehouse, streaming IoT, and the data fabric. Semantic layers we didn't ask about 2 years ago. And then here we have the data mesh. So the data mesh is it's actually dropped in what people would consider, what they're currently researching or considering. So if you recall, we were talking a lot more about data mesh a couple years ago, right? We were trying to understand it. It had its ups and downs as far as acceptance and approach, and companies that are doing it is still a very viable place for a lot of companies. I still work in companies that are implementing data mesh kind of approaches, but here it's kind of slipped a little bit down since we've asked about it in 2 years. So the interesting thing with this, we have the 2025 priorities. I think they kind of check out. Some of them are interesting. And this is the compared and what's changed in the last 2 years. Now we get to sit down and say, well, why do you think that happened? Right? What are some of the theories of these adoptions? One of the ones I would have is people who are looking at mesh a couple years ago probably started to realize it's pretty hard. I consider that something that mature organizations start tackling, and it's usually with the clients I talk to. I say, hey, let's start out simple, and let's grow into a mesh if you need domain-centric and kind of ownership things, if it makes sense. So start out centralized, then go distributed in your data architectures. But these are the types of things I will probably come in and say, here's what I think is the reason for these things. So this is kind of the fun part. Since I am still working on this, at least I've got the draft and we're going to finalize it, but over the next week, what do you guys think about this? Does this check out with your gut feel? We should be kind of confirming this gut feel that you guys have, after being at the event for 2 or 3 days here. Does it all check out?
I like having semantic layers separate.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering if it's going to take on a life of its own. Yeah. So when we do this again next time, we'll have another kind of data point to compare to. So anyway, this is what we're going to be sharing, and then we're going to be diving into all of this data. So remember, these were the 6 different kind of primary architectures. This is how they changed on the leaderboard for 2025. Now, one of the things to do about data architecture, the approach that I took 2 years ago, was to say, what is your perception? And some of the people, when we were working on this design survey a couple years ago, it's like, well, wouldn't it help if you gave them a definition of a data lakehouse, or if you gave them a definition of a data fabric? Actually, no, because I don't want to say I'm the authority and because this is my definition of it. I'm just going to ask you, based on your perception and your understanding, what do you think? If you've heard the term. So here, I went in with that same thing, and the key here was, which data architecture do you understand well, your own comfort level with that term, and then including its compelling business value, right? Why would we do this, right? So you can see here, when it came to cloud in 2025, cloud data warehousing was still at the top because people say, I understand it. Well, yeah, it's pretty mature. It's been around for a long time. So it's kind of moved through that maturity curve. And I understand its compelling value, right? Once again, I'm also measuring at different points. This is also for the vendors. If it's a new term like semantic layers, which, by the way, did come out 20 years ago, but this new reincarnation of semantic layers for AI, it's like, hey, the market needs more education on this. They need clearer definitions. They need to understand the business value behind all of this. So it kind of helps them as well, right? They understand the compelling value for Gen AI, for real time, we go from 51, and I usually bracket this, right? 51 and 49 are close. 32, 32, that would be the next tier, and the third tier, around 25, would be data fabric, streaming, IoT, and search. So normally I group these into like 3 different tiers of value that people believe that each one of these architectures have. Now, interesting thing, what was 2023? How did this shift? Well, cloud data warehousing actually decreased a little bit, but I think that was really to make room for Gen AI in a lot of cases. Right? So this is multi-select. So people can come in and select multiple ones, and I think everybody's clicking on 2 or 3, and maybe a few people didn't bother to click on cloud warehousing, but it's still number 1. 51 and 49.8% is a category. Real-time and lakehouse dropped from 53 to 32%, 42 to 32%. But this is the percentage of people who believe that they understand this well and its compelling value. So think about that. What does that mean? Lakehouse. Would you say that you understand what the compelling value about a lakehouse is? How would you answer that one? There's certain ones that, hey, a lot of people are talking about this, but I don't really get what the value is for that. Why should we spend the time and effort to move to a lakehouse architecture? One of the things I've noticed in the companies over the last 2 years working on lakehouse is that it does make sense, but it's more of a, hey, when we do our next upgrade or when we do the next evolution or chapter of our architecture, it's opportunistic. Maybe that's when we'll switch gears, go cloud native and start separating compute and storage, open table formats. but I'm not going to drop everything I'm doing right now to go run off and do that. That's kind of one of the things I would interpret based on my experience. Data mesh and understanding its value kind of went from 29 to 23%. It dropped a little bit as well. Now, from understanding value, right, and understanding what you think is the most important, we flipped the question, and it got interesting because what do you think is the most valuable for your company to do in the next 5 years? And you can see Gen AI shot right to the top of that list, forward-looking, the next 5 years. So yes, there's a lot of confusion. It's new, right? Even though it's been really kind of, the storm came in about 2 years ago, right? But we're still just now starting to piece it together. Now we've gone from prompt engineering to RAG, and now we're at the beginning of agentic, and these different kind of architectures kind of starting to settle in place. And a lot of companies are saying, hey, I think I'm going to start, I loved it this morning from the morning keynote, to be AI ready. Maybe next year or 2 years we'll be AI first, but right now we can start to be AI ready. So that's why I think they're saying, hey, let's start laying that ground foundation right now. Now also, cloud data warehousing, real-time lakehouse, it follows the same thing I saw in 2023. This was interesting. In the last time we did this report, you can see real-time analytics flipped and took the lead over what's the most valuable in the next 5 years, where people said cloud data warehousing was, but in the next 5 years, real-time will be. Here, they went back to cloud warehousing being the most kind of value in the next 5 years, followed by real-time. So interesting. Maybe it's just margin of error, because we're only talking about 2%, right? And then we've got a tier that we drop from the 30 down to the 20s, followed by all your favorite architectures, lakehouse, fabric, IoT, and mesh. And it's always been in that order. And I think lakehouse has kind of been a little bit more widely accepted. It's technical, so it's pretty clear. Fabric is kind of nebulous these days, still is. I think that's not going to change. And then mesh is just kind of a little bit of a different animal as well. So those kind of make sense to me. So the next set of questions, once again, getting people's perceptions. What are the drivers for a new architecture? Why do you even care? Why should we change your architecture? Those are big deals, right? Whether it's migrating to the cloud or adopting a new fabric approach, right? We're always trying to, when I'm talking to CIOs and CDOs, they're saying, hey, we want to do something, but we don't want to kind of go down the wrong road. We kind of want to do something and stick to it for the next 5 years. So it's a serious decision. So here, what are the drivers? Well, first, enable AI, ML, and Gen AI use case adoptions, which is interesting because what was going on before was about halfway down, increase analytics performance, stability, and agility, enable broader analytics and self-service. The third place one, I think, was one of the more important ones last time. So there we go. First, increase operational real-time, and then we went to enable the AI ML use cases. And we had the percent change there. So are these the things in your organization that are driving any talk of these architecture changes? Is it primarily being driven by the ability to enable more scalable, more teams that are embracing AI projects, specifically AI use cases? So you're not alone. See? That's why it kind of helps us with submitting these kind of things and plans that we want to do in our architectures. So here we started to say, hey, where are you at? This is just some information to share. Implementation timelines, already underway from last year. That's a good 28%. Plan to begin implementing first half of this year. So that's a kind of a smaller percent, but looks like a lot of people are planning implementations for the second half of this year. I'm not sure why, but there's a lot of planned implementations going on for this year. And then it really drops off, hey, we're working on stuff and we plan to kind of get to it in 2026 and 27. I do talk to some companies that are saying, hey, we're working on this, but we're thinking maybe 2026 or 2027. But you can see the ones who are doing it now, there's a sense of urgency. Now, with the Gen AI thing and some of the sessions I've been enjoying moderating and sitting in and taking notes, it occurred to me, hey, what is a driver? It's not that, hey, we should do this. It's going to help us be more efficient and increase productivity and all that kind of stuff. I believe that most of these companies are afraid, right? That's what drives us. My competition's going to use AI and beat me, number one. Or number two, some new disruptive AI company is going to come out of left field and disrupt our whole market and affect our company. I think they're worried about external forces more than internal forces right now. And that's what I think is kind of a driver. We need to do something this year. So, data sources, I had to ask these basic questions. What are your primary data sources? 81% said operational databases. So, a lot of you should be breathing a sigh of relief because I think most of our lives were like, we're talking about operational databases, right? Cloud SaaS, yep, we're using one of the big SaaS providers, but it does come into streaming data. Now, streaming data, I left it kind of vague, what's streaming. A lot of the companies I've been talking to are tied to observability and looking at streaming log data. So they're streaming events. Some companies are IoT streaming. Some are looking at business management streaming and moving to real time. That's fine, but I think we have this kind of adoption or increase. That's why log data is right behind it. I did break that out, but it's still, I think those two are tied. Document, semi-structured data, 56%, third party, and then external API feeds, 52%. So, and then unstructured still sitting down at 47. And unstructured is a lot of the context that we need to feed into the vector databases and the knowledge graphs in order to help our RAG architectures work. So I was a little surprised that that unstructured data is a little bit lower. I also think that when I'm talking to companies, I'm reminded that when we did go through the big data years, like 10 years ago or something like that, all the talk of unstructured data and these massive data lakes, we were all putting structured data in it. We weren't really tackling unstructured data. And now we need that unstructured data in order to feed it to AI to make that work. We didn't need unstructured data to make our dashboards work, right? So here's the change from 2023, right? We had this operational databases went from 55 to 81%. Log data went from 51 to basically 58%. And then IoT data jumped from 34 to 51%. Those are some of the ones that were primary kind of changes in the last 2 years in priorities at companies. So if we're going to ask about the data sources, what are you ingesting? What are you trying to manage, right, in the data management realm? All the different types of data. The next question is pretty basic. Which cloud platforms are you guys using, right? So we just want to know. It didn't change. It's still the usual ranking. AWS followed by Azure, then Google, followed by Oracle, IBM, and then Salesforce, SAP, and Alibaba. So, and the numbers, the percentages have increased, but this is also a multi-select to allow companies to say, I'm in 2 different platforms, 3 different platforms, things like that. So they could check, I'm in Google and AWS if they wanted. So, but the numbers increased, but the order of the rankings didn't really increase. 70%, 70%, and then 40%, that's a kind of a good 30% drop when you go from the 2 big ones down to Google, and then it's another 20% drop from Oracle and IBM. So you can see the tiers in the rankings there, right? 70% to 40% to 20%. That's kind of the broad strokes of the cloud platform. So any thoughts, feedback? I mean, does this kind of click with the things that you talk about back at your company? Or is there any kind of open kind of questions? Okay. Process, soak it in. Yes?
In one of the slides, you talked about Gen AI adoption based on the external fear.
Mm-hmm.
Does that indicate it's a bubble?
So that's interesting. This is, I can look at the data and say people are prioritizing that, and that's it based on a perception, right? But when I look at that, I have to come up with different kinds of theories or hypotheses as to why. And I would say that when it comes to this, when I talk to different companies, I do hear the worry of the industry that they're in and their own concerns and those kind of, it wasn't part of the surveys, just my experience, talking to people at events, talking to people at different companies in my network, things like that. So that's kind of just my, hey, here's my hypothesis behind that. Maybe it's driven. Maybe I should add that question into a survey next time and be more specific now that I saw the Gen AI drivers kind of up there. I knew Gen AI was going to land in the top 3. I didn't think it was going to go all the way to number 1 like it did. But, with the amount of buzz we see these days, it should make sense. So, no, it's a good point. Any other thoughts? Okay. So this is kind of the high level, right? This is talking about why do you feel you need to change your architecture? Which ones are you looking at? Where is the value? That kind of thing. So the next set of slides here is for each one of the individual architectures, I tried to ask the same set of maybe 5 or 6 questions to get people's different perceptions about each one of those, because then I could start comparing across them as well. But what I'm going to share with you right now is looking into each one so that maybe you can say, hey, you saw that list and you saw all 6 of them, and you're like, yep, we're on the fabric one. Then when we hit the fabric one, you're going to see all these other kinds of drivers and obstacles and things like that that might kind of resonate with you just a little bit further. So let's go with the order of the ranking according to 2025. So Gen AI came up first. So with Gen AI, this is where it's a perception thing. So the 3 main questions here I asked about every one of the architectures. One is, what's your familiarity with the term, right? Because sometimes you get into, and this is good, right? Have not heard of it, 0.5%. I think that's pretty fair. I like to go out and say, you can't throw a Frisbee without somebody who's heard of Gen AI at this point, right? And then we move up to, I've heard of it, I need to do more research into it, we're currently researching into it, actively working with it. So there's not the full kind of descriptions there, but yeah, for Gen AI, actively working with it, currently researching it, that's 75% of the respondents right there. So a lot of people are tinkering, which is what I tell people. I'm like, get into it. Don't be like some AI expert, AI architecture. Be an AI generalist, right? Lots of people, whatever, I don't know, whether it's Gartner or somebody else or some random kind of percentage, it's 60, 70, or 80% of people will respond saying that, yes, I use ChatGPT, or I use it in personal life, I use it in work, things like that. I thought it was interesting that I don't want my boss to know about it this morning. So, I would think that see, this is kind of my perception. You would want your bosses to know about it because everybody seems to be talking about having that on your resume, having that as your skill set, your strength, right? To be the one on the team who knows that hallucinations are real. I encounter them. I think the biggest thing is we're actually going to have to work a little harder nowadays to kind of really critical thinking, analyze the data and say, does this make sense? But it's a good jump start today. But get your hands dirty, play around. A lot of companies I work with, the CDOs are asking for 1 or 2 things. One is play with it securely, and how do I put the guardrails and the architecture in place so that we can do that? That's what they're usually asking for in the work that I do. What is your general impression? Left side is positive, middle is neutral, risky or dismissive, right? Dismissive would mean this is just hype, ignore it. You can see it's really weighted on the this is positive. I'm not talking about today or 5 years from now. There is a positive impression of this. Definition consistency, because some of our architecture terms, mesh, fabric, people can say they know what it is, but they can also say, hey, everybody's confused. This needs to settle down so that we can actually move forward. So here, there is pretty high definition consistency around Gen AI. That helps it move forward into adoption. That's the way I look at it as well. That's how they're related. If I feel positive about it, I feel that the industry is pretty clear about it, I will start to spend more time with it and kind of move it closer to adoption. So left-hand box is going to be business value outcome from generative AI. Right-hand box is the challenges that we will likely have to overcome in order to adopt this. So I just kind of highlighted the top ones. Improve decision-making with data insights. That makes sense, right? The Gen AI, the co-pilots, analyze this stuff, brings up some insights. You're like, hey, those are pretty good. I didn't think of that, right? So some of us have seen that. Increased employee productivity. That's a clear one. Everybody talks about it. While there is this whole discussion of all the jobs and changes and things like that, there also is a debate that, hey, we're freeing ourselves up to do more valuable work. If you have good people, you want them to do more work, higher value work in the organization. So the first use cases that are going to get eaten up by Gen AI are going to be the ones that RPA was trying to tackle for the last 5 to 10 years, right? Robotic process automation. And then we're going to move into Gen AI to try to automate that. Automation is usually the key to these kinds of business productivity. Improve search and information discovery. Right? You saw the example right before this. This was really cool where he would type in the chatbot, tell me who talked about open source. Well, you're going to talk to your enterprise. You're going to talk to your data sets. I'm actually pretty excited about the Gen BI world. It's something some of us are talking about through the semantic layers where we say, yeah, tell me how many widgets were sold on this product line in, I heard the quote, Pacific Northwest this morning. It comes back with the data. And you're like, oh, can you put this into a bar chart for me? Great. Drag that. And Corda did that. Drag that over into the dashboard. BI development is going to get overhauled by Gen BI. So imagine business people, analysts, managers coming in and talking to your data that we're putting into star schemas, data warehouses, things like that, via a semantic layer, because it understands the relationships between data, elements, and entities. On the what's a big challenge? There you go, 45.7. LLM's accuracy and hallucination risks. So what I believe we're going to see is this kind of, like we had with ML ops, you're going to have something around Gen AI that's going to be ops, which is, okay, we've built this AI engineering, this pipeline, we're pulling in the RAG, we're sending it to the LLM, returns the answer to a user, an intermediary, or somebody who can check that. And then as we find and we test the answers, and as we gain trust in those answers, then we start to roll it out. But the more specific the use case, the more likely the answers and the accuracy will increase. So I think we're going to see an ops side of this start to emerge later this year. Data privacy, yes. A lot of companies I'm talking to are really exploring how to bring those LLMs on-prem, not sending their data up into the public APIs, number one. Number two, they have a concern that the price of GPUs on the cloud are going to be pretty expensive. Can we invest in a couple of those and set up our own server here with GPUs, install our own LLMs, and kind of architect that right alongside our data architecture to deliver Gen AI capabilities? So privacy, but I'm going to say cost. Challenge to overcome, finding AI, ML skilled resources. I think that's the point of this conference. Many of the conferences that are out there is for us to kind of get upskilled, get our hands dirty, start learning this. It is kind of the next major wave. The adoption will take X number of years, but it is the direction we're going, and we'll try to get as much efficiency as we can out of it. Maybe it's 30% this year or next year, maybe it's 60% the year after that, and I'm sure there's going to be some new big thing for us to tackle after that, right? That's the kind of the beauty of having been around the industry as long as I have. I've watched every one of these trends kind of roll in and roll out. So this is a bigger wave. If you're surfing, just think of that seventh wave that comes along. Lower on the list, this one surprised me at the bottom there. Implementing a RAG system to fine-tune Gen AI was at 30%. I expected that one to be a little higher, but I guess people are in the space where they feel comfortable with the information that's out there to know how to go forward and do that, so they're not as worried. Implementing a vector database or knowledge graph for Gen AI to use. I thought that would be a little higher on the list. Apparently, people are pretty comfortable with that. We can roll that out. We can do it. So interesting to know that people are comfortable there. So that's kind of how this is the approach of how do people feel about it? How do they feel about the definitions about it? With that kind of information, we can assess its ongoing adoption and then take a look at where's the value drivers, because you've got to have a good, strong value driver for the business to make a big change like this. And then what are the biggest obstacles? Can we tackle and kind of eliminate or mitigate that risk? Those are the factors that, to me, kind of lead into how the architecture is going to be adopted. Sound like a good idea there? All right, that's just the approach we used in the survey. So a little bit of a subjective, but we did put some data behind it. Number 2 was the streaming data piece. Same format. You can see here, I also put in the 2023 data, so you could see how the perceptions have shifted. With familiarity, it didn't change too much. I mean, actively using kind of went down, currently looking into went down a little bit. Heard of it, more people have heard of it, but they didn't kind of progress. So that kind of explains why the streaming data space might be just holding flat and not going on some big adoption rate. General impressions still tend to lead to the left, and that is more about positive versus negative. Definition consistency hasn't changed. So people feel the same way about real-time as we have 2 years ago. And for those of us who've been doing real-time for decades, we're like, it's not new, right? It's just the technology is getting better, it's evolving, we have newer components, but we understand it pretty well. So the question is, what's the business case that's going to drive the value to adopt that? Here, improved real-time business analytics and insights. I call this in the moment, right? It's the missed opportunity if you don't act on the window when you have it, right? You have that customer's attention for a minute. Can you work within that, right? Because tomorrow's data is not going to help you to cross-sell, upsell, or help them. Faster decisions where business opportunities have a short time. Biggest challenges, solving complex use cases involving real-time integration in historical data. So I was in 2 presentations here that talked about the Kappa and Lambda and Delta architectures that are addressing this. So that's probably something that's moving forward. Selecting a database capable of ingesting and analyzing data in real time. We heard that a lot of our cloud data warehouse platforms are that. They're built for historical trend analysis, not really built for streaming data ingestion and streaming or analytics. Makes sense. Cloud, I think, is pretty straightforward. I didn't do the kind of the 3-piece on this one. It's just I thought we've been doing cloud for a while. Enabling broader analytics, AI-driven growth supported, I thought might be a little higher for value. Mitigation or obstacles, lack of defined strategy and architecture roadmap. I threw that question in because that's what I do, so I'm just curious where it falls on the list of what companies need. And it went from 33% 2 years ago to 47%. My hypothesis here, based on what I'm seeing from other companies, is they're coming and asking for their AI-ready strategy. They've had a data strategy, and they said, we need to update this to talk about our AI-ready strategy with the Gen AI workloads and things like that. So there might feel like we don't have that roadmap for the primary number 1 in the survey, which was Gen AI. So that kind of, at least that's what I think it's about. IT adoption of new technologies and services. So what's your ability to change and adopt new technologies and integrate them within IT? Data governance and security, lower than I thought it would be as an obstacle, but it went from 48% down to 29%. So congrats, we must have gotten much better at data governance in the last 2 years. So that's what I'll take away with, I'll take that win. Concerns about cloud billing and cost management. It dropped from 49% to 28%. I think it's a real thing, but if you remember 2 years ago, that was a pretty big hype. Everybody was really talking a lot about surprise billing, surprise charges, and FinOps was a thing for a good year or so. It didn't go away, but I think it makes sense that it's adjusted like that. All right, Number 4, if you recall, data lakehouse. So a lot of us are probably working on or already have kind of the first steps into a data lakehouse architecture. Familiarity, you can see the numbers haven't changed much, so no big change there. General impression, still positive. 13% on risky, data governance and security. I think that's because it's a new approach to data management. Definition consistency, yes, at a conceptual level, and it's gotten better at a detailed level. That's consistent with what I think is going on. I think that Lakehouse is moving down the road of, hey, adopt when it makes sense. Top business value, ability to develop and manage data products more easily. It's interesting to relate that to a lakehouse architecture, but that's what people picked as number 1. And it's up from 41 to 47%, enabling broader BI and AI and ML use cases, which dropped a little bit, 11%. But this is what Lakehouse is really about. It's the convergence of both BI workloads and AI workloads, and data science workloads all under one umbrella. Top challenges. Data governance and security. So people have more concerns about the lakehouse with governance and security. Compatibility with tools in the data lakehouse ecosystem. So yes, let's move to a lakehouse. Let's put a catalog there. Let's have Iceberg for access, or Delta, or Hudi if you want. And with that, are all my other tools going to play well with that? How's my Power BI going to work? How's my Tableau going to work, So I think people are thinking about how's my ETL and my pipelines going to work when I want to push down into the database for these compute process jobs. I think that's the concern there. Number 5 was Fabric. So Fabric is going to be followed by semantic layers, but here, familiarity, actively working on it, it went up, or actually 23. So it went from up to down. Currently researching it went up a little bit. Still positive. It looks like good positive for IT data management went from 30 to 41%. And the consistency of it, definition consistency, improving went up, somewhat went down, and no, not at all is kind of held the same. So a little bit of progress and progression over 2 years on the data fabric. Business value, ability to manage and deploy data products again. So that's kind of at the top of that list. Improved data management and quality with AI. So people are associating data fabric with data management and AI, which I think is great because under my definition of data fabric, it does include a lot of AI for data management, AI for analytics. Challenges, adoption of a new technology and platform, migration away from your current or legacy architecture. Change is hard, but that's where moving to a fabric, I think people are calling it out a little bit more. This is the new one. So there's no 2023 data, but on semantic layer, here we have familiarity, 16%, currently looking at 28, and need to research. So more on the, it's growing there. General impression is positive. Definition consistency, 38%, that's pretty good. Semantic layers aren't really a new concept for us, but I think we're defining it for this generation. So that looks pretty consistent. The business value drivers for a semantic layer, improving Gen AI with metadata and semantic context. I am glad to see that's number 1, because everything I've been telling you for the last couple of days would have been wrong. Faster time to insights for business users as well, The ability to converse or have a conversation with your data, that's faster time to insights. Challenges, integrating or embedding the existing tools and data sources, finding skilled semantic modeling resources. That makes sense too. So that's kind of where we're sitting with the semantic layer in search. And I think it makes sense, and it's new, and it has a lot of future value potential. So This is where I went through all 6 of those. You can kind of see this. When you get the full report, you can kind of take this data away. You can kind of have discussions in your teams, in your company, or share it to kind of also use as support and validation for some of the efforts you're doing to show it's in line with at least one survey, yet another survey in the industry. This is the ranking and the summary. The key takeaways, if I was to summarize this at this point without all those little hypotheses, Gen AI is going to continue to dominate for several years, right? We are just getting into kind of moving through the one wave of RAG. 2 years ago, it was prompt engineering was the buzz, right? Now we're into the RAG. Next is going to be agentic coming out of that. I already have people talking to me about MCP servers and coordinators and orchestrators. So that, they say 2025 is going to be the year of agentic. We'll see. A lot of other technologies need to catch up. Streaming and IoT moves higher because, hey, if you can do things faster on the Gen AI side, well, let's get in data and make decisions faster, right? So one of the things I do when it comes to automation is what business looks for all the time. So I think in the BI world, we looked for insights and taking action. And I think in data science and then in the Gen AI world, we're looking for prediction, generation. And if we have confidence in that, and if we can trust that at a good level, then we will automate it. So right now, we're in the human-assisted or augmented mode. But as it gets better, we'll just say, stop checking in with me and just go do it already. I just don't know if that's 2 years away or 5 years away. But that's one of the things we'll see it evolve. I would say data lakehouses are fairly accepted. I mean, I've taught courses on the lakehouses, and the question used to be, should we do a lakehouse? I would say if you're serious about moving to the modern data architecture, you should move to a data lakehouse when it's the right time for your organization to make that shift. And then the semantic layers. I will say I'm kind of excited about the semantic layers and its relationship to the data fabric and all the context we need. Because we've always lived in the world of data and information. That's fine, because we had a human who could process that. Now we need to give context so we can give it to AI. And that's going to be the semantic layer kind of next chapter. So it's definitely one of the areas I'm going to spend the most of my time in this year is working on getting more hands-on with the semantic layer world. And I'm going to wrap this up. If you wanted to scan this, I will say that coming next month, we are launching a network for modern data architects to join online, have conversations with each other, help each other out, discuss topics like this, have vendor guest speakers, all that kind of stuff. So this is just a wait list if you're interested in joining that. It's on schedule to go next month. And that I'm excited about. Now, so what's exciting to me about joining this is the fact that we can think, oh yeah, a lot of these are somebody coming in who's an expert talking about stuff. I'm like, no, I learned just as much from you guys as you learned from me because we're both sharing. So I need this as much as you guys do because I need to hear what everybody's working on, what they're struggling with, and we have good conversations and discussions about it. So this has been in the making for a while. And with that, I will wrap up. If you download the deck from the conference, I will say the whole next set of 10 or 15 slides are all the demographics. 260 some odd respondents. What industries? What sizes? What roles were the people answering this? Were they business? Were they IT? All of that's in the rest of the deck for you to dig into a little further, so I included that. So with that, thanks everybody for coming to the Data Summit this year.
We will see you back here next year, May 6 and 7. Thanks for coming.